Well, I feel so privileged to be a part of this body and have just enjoyed it, my wife Lillian and I. And so thank you, Brian, for the opportunity and the privilege to speak this morning. We're continuing our series on relationships. And I've heard it said that you can't have too many friends. Have any of you ever heard that before? And the idea that the one with the most friends wins. And now in this day of social media, how many of you keep track of how many friends you have? I do. I have, now this is going to embarrass some of you, like, really? I have 339 as of this morning. Okay? All right? Okay? And some of you are just going, that's only 3 digits. Okay, but I'm doing the best I can. Now, I think I bought into this idea when I was in high school. I went through elementary school. I went to Grandview Elementary, and basically it was the same kids from kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. And so I might not have been friends with all of them, but we knew each other. We were familiar with each other. It was very, very comfortable. And then I went to Center across the street for junior high, and it was still pretty much the same group of kids. But then I went to aviation, which no longer is there, but that was a high school of 2,000 kids. And I was a very small fish in a very big pond, and I felt very lonely. And I remember walking the campus and seeing the football players in their Letterman's jackets and lots of people surrounding them and the cheerleaders. And I just thought, man, I wish I were like them. I wish I had so many friends. Then my life would be everything that I want it to be. Well, let's just kind of leapfrog into the 21st century and social media. And now I can be friends with people literally around the world. And they're just a click away. And now, like I say, I got 339 friends. But have I won? Is having that many friends really a good thing or not? And that's the point of my sermon this morning. Do we really need to rethink about how many relationships we have? And should we not focus more on the quality of our relationships than the quantity? So to kind of introduce this idea, I found an article in the Good Men Project from July 2022. And the author said this: back when you were in high school, having lots of friends meant you were cool. You were thinking it was a wonderful quality of your life, surrounded by friends. How fantastic! You were thinking that friendships are important to you, and the idea of letting them go didn't set well with you. We're bred to think lots of friends are a good thing. The more you have on social media, the more popular you are. The more people who come to your birthday party, the more people like you. It's all about the volume of friendships when you're young and dumb. Yet, when you grow up, when you surpass the age of young and dumb, your ever-growing friendship circle doesn't always mean that you're winning at life. Then Psychology Today had an article in 2023 entitled Social Overload. Do you have too many friends? And it concluded with this one sentence. And this is basically the launching pad for everything I want to say the rest of the morning. It's okay to acknowledge the constraints of our cognitive capacities for social connections and actively choose depth over breadth. Let me repeat just the last sentiment of that. It's okay to actively choose depth over breadth. And that's what I want to focus on this morning. Instead of trying to get more and more and more friends and thinking that's somehow how we win the game, isn't it more important to go deeper than to go broader? Now, Psychology Today says it's okay to do that. I would say the Bible goes much further and says, no, it's mandatory. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is to go deeper in our relationships and make the most of them. But that means we have to make choices. When we talk about choices, what we're talking about is economics. And that's the title of my message, The Economics of Relationships. Economics is the study of the choices we make because resources like time, money, and energy are limited while our desires and our wants are not. And my mom and dad taught me a lot about economics when I was pretty young. Did any of you receive an allowance? Okay, just a couple of you. Well, I'm sorry for the rest of you. But I was blessed. My mom and dad, and I think my day was a quarter a week. Went a long way back in the 50s and 60s, but now not so far. But I was given an allowance. But my mom and dad made it very clear that with that allowance, I had to buy the things that I wanted. They weren't going to bail me out. So if I wanted a game, I had to save for it because my finances were limited. Well, I want to make the case that when it comes to relationships, our resources are very limited as well. And how are they limited? Well, the one that's obvious, I think, to all of us is we're limited in our time. We only have so much time that we can devote to relationships. We have 24 hours in a day. Anybody have more than 24 hours? Okay, good. 24 hours in a day. I think we all wish we had more than that, but we don't. And in with those 24 hours, we have to find enough time to sleep, to work, to do all of our household responsibilities, our social obligations. And then when you get to the bottom of it, there's not a lot of time left for relationships. But there's another constraint we have that I think is a little less acknowledged, but equally important. And that's what I want to focus on this morning. And that is we have a limited capacity for relationships. In England in the 1990s, there was a sociologist named Robin Dunbar. And he did a lot of studying of different civilizations and societies. And he postulated that in looking at these, that we had a limited capacity. And he put together what he said is his Dunbar's number. And this next slide shows what that looks like. You'll notice that it's concentric circles. And the closer you are to the most intimate relationships, the numbers are small. And then as you get further and further out, they get larger and larger. And in other words, like psychology today pointed out, we have a limited capacity. That we can only accommodate so many people at that very intimate level. And then our best friends, and then our good friends, and then our friends. Now, I don't believe that this is from the Bible. I don't believe it's mandated in that way. But I do believe that this has taken a lot of traction. And it makes a lot of sense to me in my life as I evaluate my relationships. And I hope that it'll help you too in navigating yours. So let's take a look at the layers, what they represent, and then we'll get into the Bible. That first group, that inner circle, these are the individuals with whom you have the closest emotional contact and bond. Your immediate family, partners, best friends. And you likely spend about 40% of your available social interaction time with those people. Then we have the second layer. And these are your best friends. And this often includes your closest friends, extended family, maybe cousins, aunts and uncles, and extended family members. These are people you trust and would likely call upon for support. I think of it as if one of my kids had a baby, who are the people I want to know first? If I had some very dire medical news that I received, who would I want praying for me? I'd reach out to these individuals first. Then that next level, the group of closer friends and extended family with whom I have regular contact. I make a point of seeing them on a regular basis. Maybe it's once a month, a quarter, but I'm going to make a point of seeing them. And then finally, that outer layer are the people that we have a meaningful relationship with. And I believe a lot of that has to do with proximity. People we see on a regular basis, people we go to church with. In my case, it's a Rotary Club where I met Brian, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we look at this, if we take it for what it's worth, we have to recognize that means we have to be selective in who is where. We can only accommodate so many people in our closest circles. How do we do that? Well, it means the economics of relationships means we have to prioritize. Prioritize means to designate or treat someone as more important than others. That's hard, isn't it? How many of you get a little uncomfortable thinking about having to make those choices? Like, how do I decide who are my best friends as opposed to my best friends? And would it hurt somebody's feelings to know that they're not as close to me or I'm not as close to them as they feel that they're close to me? And so a lot of us put off making those kinds of choices. But here's the sad reality. If you don't prioritize who your friends are and who gets to be in those inner circles, other people will prioritize for you. An example of that, I had a professor at the Bible school I went to, and he was a full-time pastor, and he taught a couple classes because he just loved kids and he wanted to make a difference for the future generations. And one day he was sharing a story with us is that he got a phone call from his secretary, and the secretary said, the chairman of the elder board's on the phone. He needs to meet with you at 3 o'clock today. There's an emergency in the church, and he has to meet with you at 3 o'clock. And my teacher basically told the secretary, said, well, I'm not able to meet at 3 o'clock. I could meet at 5, I could meet earlier, but I can't meet at 3 o'clock. I have a prior engagement. So the secretary told the elder that, and the elder said, put me through to the pastor. And so basically the elder said, I can't believe this. This is important. The whole future of our church depends on you and meeting and figuring out this problem. And he said, well, I can meet with you later, I can meet with you earlier, but I can't meet with you at 3 o'clock. And the elder, very frustrated and very angry at this point, said, why? I don't get it. What is so important that you can't meet with me at 3 o'clock? He said, well, if you must know, I'm roller skating with my daughter. And the elder almost lost it. What do you mean? The church's future's at stake. And he says, no, my daughter matters to me. And I've told her that I was going to roller skate with her at 3 o'clock, and I'm not putting that off. I can meet with you later, I can meet with you earlier. But the real tragedy of the story is that later on, the pastor found out that the reason that the elder wanted to meet at 3 was because he had an opening in his schedule that just promptly appeared. That was convenient for him. He didn't care that it wasn't convenient for the pastor or anybody else. And we're going to see that that's true in our lives too. So we must prioritize. Now, as we look to the scriptures, I believe that Jesus illustrates this point for us in his own life. Now, Jesus was God, but in becoming flesh, we see in Philippians chapter 2 that he limited himself. And he limited himself in terms of the capacity that he had for relationships. So let's take a look at Jesus. First of all, there is one non-negotiable high priority. It's the highest priority we can have. Before we start looking at our relationships to each other and those very important people in our lives, the most important relationship, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, is your relationship to God. That vertical relationship is vital. It's essential because every other relationship you have is either going to be benefited or deterred by that relationship, okay? And Jesus models this for us. Mark 1:35 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. That drips a priority, doesn't it? Early in the morning when it wasn't convenient. Away from the house where it wasn't convenient. Solitary place, no conveniences. But he spent time with his heavenly Father. And Jesus models that for us, that the most important relationship that we need to spend the most time with is our relationship with God. But after that, we see that Jesus did prioritize some people over others. The first, his inner circle, that group that Dunbar talks about being 5, he limited to just 3 people in his life. And those people were Peter, James, and John. Now there's some very, to me, humorous interactions because the other disciples didn't like them being prioritized over them. And they squabbled and they murmured and they did all these things. Didn't faze Jesus at all. He didn't apologize. Peter, James, and John are my 3 main guys. How do we know that? Because at the 2 most important events in his life, his transfiguration and his passion in the garden, these are the 3 guys he took to go with him. And we see this in Matthew chapter 26. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Those were the 3 guys that he was the most vulnerable with, that got to see him at his lowest point and at his highest point. That's intimacy. But then he had another group, and that's the disciples. Now, at one point, we see that the number of disciples numbered 72. In Mark chapter 8, he says he sent out 72. But out of the 72, he selected 12 to be kind of his posse. Many of you told me that one of your favorite shows is Chosen, The Chosen. And what you love about that show is the reality and how you get a sense of what it was like to be with Jesus and his disciples. And you see that. He called 12 guys at the exclusion of everybody else to be close to him. And then at the end of his life, you find out who your real friends are when your luck changes. And when you're down on your luck, that's when you know who your friends are. Well, I don't think Jesus' luck from a worldly perspective could have gotten much lower than he was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed for crime. Who was left? Who stood by him in his darkest hour? Well, we see in Acts chapter 1 that it all boiled down to just 120 people. In those days, Peter stood up among the believers, a group numbering about 120. That's all that we're left. So we see even in Jesus' life this limited capacity, but he prioritized some people over others. I think that's an example for the rest of us. So how does this apply to us? Well, again, there's one top priority, non-negotiable. Before we start entertaining a relationship with anybody else, we need to examine our relationship with God. In Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 5, this is the hallmark of Judaism for our Jewish friends. It says this, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength." God needs to be number one. First and foremost, no exceptions. When we look at the Old Testament and we look at the law, the whole law of the Old Testament, 613 commands, is summarized in just 10. And the first 4 have to do with our relationship with God. No other gods before me, no idols. You shall reverence the name of God, not use it in vain. You shall put a whole day, just for your relationship with God and to make sure you have time to be with me. The first 4 commandments have to do with that. And so our relationship with God has to be first and foremost. But now, what does the Bible give us any information on how to populate those other circles? I believe it does. And I believe it'll be somewhat surprising to some of you to see the priorities that God puts on relationships. The first and most important relationship that God tells us about is the 5th commandment. And it is, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. In other words, the most important relationship in all of our lives is the primary one, the fundamental one is our relationship to our parents. And nothing can take the place of that. Now, I have an asterisk by that. I'll come back to that in a second. But our relationship to our parents is so vitally important. Because every other relationship we will ever have is impacted by whether that relationship was a good one or a bad one. After the first service, I had several people come up to me and say, "Man, that's such a true point. I had a great relationship with my parents, but most of the people that came up to me said, no, it was tough. I didn't see much of them. They weren't around very much," and how that's impacted all their other relationships. And so the Bible says that those 2 people need to be in that inner circle. But there is an asterisk. And this is kind of what led me to this whole idea of economics and relationships. The first commandment that God gave to his first pair, Adam and Eve, was to be fruitful and multiply. But the next commandment that he gave to their offspring was the idea of a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And Jesus reiterates this point in Matthew 19 when he says, "Haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the 2 will become one flesh? So they're no longer 2, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." In other words, if you have a partner, if you have a spouse, now that individual has to be the most important person in your life. Now, I recognize there's some cultures that say, no, mom and dad always have to be first. And I've encountered some marital situations where it's put a tremendous strain on the relationship trying to deal with that cultural aspect. But it's a cultural one, not a biblical one. Your partner must be the most important, the closest person in your life. And then a third group that needs to be in that circle. From Ephesians chapter 6, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." That word exasperate is the idea of frustrating to the point of despair. And the way the parents do that is by neglecting their kids, by not making them a priority, by letting other things become priorities, their hobbies, their businesses, other relationships. And that frustrates kids. I taught Manhattan Beach, the middle school, for 20 years. I had close to 1,000 kids go through my classroom over that time span. And I'm happy to report that the vast majority of kids that came through my classroom seemed to be very well adjusted. They had a great relationship with their parents. And it was typical of adolescence, but for the most part, it was good. Conversely, there were always at least one or two kids in each class every year that I could tell things at home were not good. Maybe there was a divorce taking place. Maybe one of the parents was gone all the time. They would write short stories about it, and I'd see the inner dynamics of that and the negative impact it had on their lives. So our kids need to be in that inner circle. There's only room for about 5, 6, 7 people there. Choose wisely. Now, some of you are thinking, well, Duke, my parents are gone. I'm not married. I never had kids. What about me? Well, the Bible talks about relationships that can be just as meaningful and just as satisfying. And I think the coverall for this is in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. This is my wife's and mine life verse. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. It's a beautiful picture. And basically portrays for us this idea of a bond, a commitment that I'm there for you, you're there for me, and it never breaks. A biblical example of that would be Jonathan and David. They weren't related by blood, but they were related by commitment. And one had the other's back time and time again. But there's another economical principle that I think is important for us to be honest with and deal with head on. That is, how many of you would love for all of your relationships to be 50-50? Would that kind of be a good deal? Like, I give so much, you give so much. And it's kind of balanced out. Would that make all of your relationships much easier? Come on. Yes, it would, wouldn't it? The reality of life is that that's not the case. And we see it right here in this verse. If either one of them falls down, well, that person who fell down, does that put them at a disadvantage? Certainly does. They're needy. Pity if there's not one to help them up. The one helping up is the one giving much more than the one that's getting the help getting up. And that's going to be the nature of our most intimate relationships. They're not always going to be 50-50. Sometimes you're going to have to give a lot more than you're getting in return, but that's the nature of those relationships. Just yesterday, my wife was back in touch with one of her closest friends, and they hadn't been in touch for a while. And we've been praying for them because her husband has been dealing with a lot of health issues. They're in their late 70s, and so that's kind of what their life has been all about. And so my wife was very concerned about her husband's name, Ernie. How's Ernie doing? And then I could tell they were speaking Tagalog. They're Filipinos, so I didn't know all that was going on, but the tone of the conversation changed. And Celia, her friend's name, basically got very emotional. Well, the dynamics of the relationship has changed because now Ernie's doing okay, but Celia's having health issues. Basically, she's not able to walk. She's very dependent on her husband. The roles have changed completely around. But Celia was just saying, I just couldn't make it without Ernie, and he does it with such a great attitude. He's giving me 100%. I love him so much. That's the nature of those most intimate relationships. Let's move on to layer 2. And these are our best friends. These are the people. Now, for me, I have a cousin that fits in that category. And I've got some friends that I met through Rotary that fit in that category. I've got friends here at this church that fit in that category. These are my closest friends. But there's a stipulation that I think we need to pay heed to. And that is we need to be careful who we allow to be in that second level. Who are our best friends? And the passage of scripture that makes me mindful of this, Paul talks about it in 2 Corinthians when he says, don't be yoked together with unbelievers. The idea there is that when you're a farmer, you want 2 oxen to pull your plow, but you want them to pull in a straight line. And the straighter the line, the better off you are. But when you put one oxen that's weak with one that's stronger, they'll never pull in a straight line. They'll pull off, and it's chaotic. It's confusing. Well, where do you want to go in your life? What's the straight line that you want to have? Yoke yourself together with people that have the same values, the same priorities that you have for yourself. That's the point of this passage. And we need to be very careful about that. Now, I want to take just a few minutes to talk to my single brothers and sisters here this morning. Going back to my life in college is when I really started to kind of start dating. I wanted somebody special in my life. Was there anything wrong with that? No, I mean, I think it's natural. I think it's normal. And so I was looking for someone special. And what I was pursuing was romance. I wanted to feel the spark. I wanted to feel the warm tinglies. And so I would ask a girl out and hoping that she'd feel the same way and things would be going well. I had a good start somehow. I was fun and I was all these different things and we dated a couple times and then it happened. Duke, I really like you. I really care about you. Could we just be friends? No! Not friends! Oh my gosh, the friend zone! Oh. And I got put in the friend zone so many times. And it was demoralizing. Well, my grandson was down. His family had to go back up to Oregon, and he was going to El Salvador to visit other family people, but he stayed with me 3 days before I took him to the airport. We got to spend some time together. He's 16. Now, we had just been up to Oregon in November, and we met somebody special. Phoenix kind of liked her. There were sparks. And at the time between, they had become officially a boyfriend and girlfriend. Very sweet girl. And Phoenix blew me away because he said, Pop, I have a question. Sure, anything. He says, I'm kind of really interested in this girl, and do you have any advice for me? I said, wow, really? Old guy like me? He goes, yeah. Any advice? And I said, I do have some advice. And here's my advice. I said, do you like her? Duh, yeah, I like her. I said, no, do you like her? As a person, do you like her? Do you like how she is? Do you like spending time with her? Do you respect her? Do you value her friendship? And he said, oh yeah, I do. And I said, well, here's the thing. I would pursue friendship with her at this point more than romance. What do you mean? I said, develop and continue building that friendship. Because, in our day and age, we try to move people, we want to have romance, and we want to fall in love with them, we want to move them right into that inner circle. Boom. It's not working very well for many people. What I would encourage any single person here is make anybody you're seriously considering spending the rest of your life with, make them spend a lot of time in the friend zone. Make them spend a lot of time there till you find out who they really are, where they're really going, to make sure that your paths align. I told Phoenix, I said, ask the couples that you think are the most successful in your life. You know who they are. And he goes, yeah. And I said, go ask them, what's the secret to your relationship? And I guarantee, Phoenix, what they're all going to tell you is that they married their best friend. That's the key. So make sure that you're equally yoked with the right person. I'll close this section with this quote. I love it. I kind of stumbled across. But when it comes to love with a partner, love is a friendship that has caught fire. Love that. Love that. Let your friendship catch fire. Just quickly through the next 2 levels. Level 3, about 50 people in your life. Walk with the wise and become wise. For a companion, fool suffers harm. You want to be a great student, spend time with students. You want to be a great athlete, spend time with athletes. If you want to become a great drug dealer, spend time with drug dealers, okay? But whatever you want to be, spend time with those people. That's about 50 people. And again, proximity plays a big part. There's 2 groups that I'm excited about. One is my Rotary Club. I've been in it for 45 years. It's where I met Brian. We see each other almost every Monday morning. We serve together. We do all kinds of things together. It's just an invaluable experience for me. But another group that's become a very pleasant thing for me is Tuesday nights. I started the Rooted class. How many of you are in the Rooted class this time around? Anybody? Okay, awesome. It's a great thing, and I'm really proud of you for doing that. Well, we had it on Tuesday, but 4 of us wanted to keep going, so we started a Bible study a year ago, January. Just 4 of us. But we committed to each other. We're going to be important to each other. We're going to matter to each other. We're going to keep showing up. And now that group has grown to 35. And we have maybe 15 to 20 every single Tuesday, but it's a priority for all of us. I'm so glad to be a part of that community. And then finally, that 150. That's your community. For me, that's South Hills. I don't know many of you very well in this classroom, but you're a part in this room, but you are a part of my 150. And that means that all the one another's in scriptures, love one another, support one another, pray for one another. I'm there for you. And I take the prayer requests that we get very seriously. And if anybody was in need and Brian were to bring it to our attention, I would try to support you any way that I could. Well, let me close with two more economic principles, a story and an exhortation, and then we'll be done. The first additional principle is this. I believe that the lifeblood of relationships is appreciation. If you want a relationship to get stronger and more vital, if you want to go deeper in a relationship, you need to appreciate that person. Now, what does that mean? Well, right at the heart of the word of appreciation, I'm an English teacher, so forgive me this, but it's invaluable to me. The 4 letters that are the root of that word are P-R-E-C. And that tells you all you need to know about the word, because what we get from that word is precious. What is precious to you is what you appreciate, and you will show appreciation. You will show the value. You will show the worth of that. I've heard too many times couples say, we fell out of love. Oh, we just kind of go in our different directions. No, you didn't fall out of love. You stopped appreciating that person. And when you stopped appreciating that person, recognizing their worth, you stopped treating them as though they were valuable. And then they didn't feel valuable, and they began to withdraw too. If you want to rekindle any relationship we've talked about this morning, show some appreciation. Doesn't take a lot. Doesn't cost hardly anything sometimes, but it makes a world of difference. Second principle, the currency of relationships is time. If you want to show somebody they're valuable, you have to spend time with them. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, I don't spend a quantity of time, but I spend quality time. That's like me going to the gym and saying, I don't spend a lot of time in the gym, but I spend quality time in the gym. Well, how's that working? Not so well. And so it is with relationships. There's no substitute for quantity and quality. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, I want to close with showing you a picture here. And this is my story. If you were here in November, I shared with you the fact that probably the most painful thing I've gone through in my life was a divorce in 2000. And the net result of that divorce was that my ex-wife decided she wanted to go a completely different direction in her life. And my kids went with her. And for 3-4 years, they didn't want anything to do with me. We were separated. I didn't have any contact with them. And then a year into that time, they moved to San Francisco. We weren't supposed to do that. It was against the law, but they did it anyway. And so there I was. And I remember one of my 50, an attorney, family law attorney, in the midst of this, and he could see how painful it was for me. He came alongside and says, Duke, I care about you, man. I love you. And I've been a family law attorney for a long time. I've seen a lot of situations like this. I love you. I want what's best for you. You need to give up on your kids. They're not coming back. I've seen this too many times. They're poisoned. They're not coming back. I said, no. They're in my circle. They're the most important people. I can't give up on them. And I didn't. They were precious to me. I valued them. And so I did whatever I could. I would tell them, I said, look, if you decide down the line, you don't want me in your life anymore, that will kill me, but I'll have to accept it. I can live with that. But what I cannot live with is the idea that you thought for 1 second that I didn't want you in my life in a meaningful way. Well, thank God kids mature and they grow up and they hit their 20s. And we began to reconcile, and in a beautiful way. And I think we're closer now as a result of all that than we would have before. But this picture shows me, and this is my encouragement to you, why it's important to go deeper, to pay the price, to do whatever it takes, especially for some of you who have people in that inner circle that are estranged, that is strained. This is from 2021. Greg was here 2 weeks ago, and I'd gone up for my birthday. Lillian and I'd gone up for my birthday, which was in October. And then this is the first week of November. Greg was there, but he brought his dog, Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell was at the end of her life. She was skeletal. She was suffering terribly. And Greg knew that it was time that he needed to let her go. And but he didn't have the heart to do it by himself. And so he asked his brother in the middle and me if we would go with him. And what I'm trying to tell you is that because Greg matters to me, because Chuck matters to me, and I spent the time and the energy, no matter, even though it wasn't 50-50, even though there was that whacked out thing, God honored that. And I got to be with my boy at one of the toughest times in his life. And there's nothing more meaningful to me than that. And that's what God desires for us. That's why we can't settle for going broader. We need to go deeper and pay that price. So here's the commitment I would ask of you as the application to the message. My commitment, the commitment I'd ask is, I will take the time to prioritize the relationships in my life and begin to spend my time and energy accordingly. Now, I would suggest very practically, take out your phone sometime this week and just go through your phone, because isn't that where most of our contacts are? Who are your number ones? And maybe even put that in your phone. And who are your number twos and your threes? But even more importantly, let those people know it so that they will feel that appreciation, that they'll feel that value. Let me close with this quote and then I'll pray. I love this quote. True commitment is choosing each other over and over again, because ultimately, what makes relationships work is the decision to make them work. What makes relationships work is the decision to make them work. Who this week do you need to decide to make that relationship work? Who do you need to decide that you want to go deeper with for the sake of God and his kingdom? Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for your word. It is a light unto our path and a lamp unto our feet. And I thank you for that. I pray, Lord, that these words might be timely to whoever it was that you brought here for this very reason. God, help us in our relationships, and most of all, help us in our relationship to you. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.